Awesome.
There was an error updating your room. Oh no, I think we're live. I think we're
That's
live. It says live at the top.
right there.
Awesome. So, our paradox is real. We're here with Ron, good friend of
Hi.
mine and early supporter of enolve. Ron, you were talking about something that you experienced in your life recently regarding paradoxes. Bring me up to speed. What was that?
Well, let's start off with what's a paradox. Paradox is something that's contradicting in itself, or two things that exist at the same time that kind of contradict each other, right? And uh, and I had mentioned to you that I had been thinking about paradoxes lately when you had mentioned to me that you were thinking about the Matrix. So it had come up when I was talking with my wife about things that hold us up from progressing in our day-to-day lives, things that hold us up from achieving our goals, and things that we know that we want to get in our lives, but we don't actively work towards all the time. Things like video games, drugs, alcohol. And actually, we ended up getting to the point that it could be many, many things. Uh, so the paradox in that was there are a lot of things in life holding us up from being more productive and working towards our goals and the things that we want to achieve. And I know a lot of us know that there are things that we could be working towards each and every day to better the things that we want and achieve the things we want. And then there's these distractions that hinder us from progressing in our day-to-day life or in our real life, while those distractions are simultaneously our real life as well, and they're just as fulfilling experiences as those other things. So, and it doesn't have to be things like, drinking alcohol or playing video games or anything like that. It could be your house is full of all kinds of baskets, and you got all these baskets because you love making baskets, and you got enough baskets in your house to where they're just piling up in the corner, but you love to make baskets, so you keep making baskets. So, but is there food in the cabinets, or is there other things being fulfilled that you need, or are you building your business, or just any of these things that you could be working towards? So that's just one of the paradox, which kind of leads me into it's kind of here's another one. Everything happens for a reason, and everything plays out for a reason, while we all simultaneously have this limited free will to influence and change the world. So it's that's one of them too. So yeah, that's kind of where I got started, and that's kind of where we got off with paradoxes, and that's what's been boggling around in my mind with that.
That's a lot of stuff you unpack there, man. Yeah, especially I mean the one you end with is the big paradox that I don't even want to get into that right now.
Oh,
The
right,
that difference or the conflict between free will and determinism, right? The
right,
the universe seems to behave deterministically, yet it also appears that we have free will and can make choices. So is that an illusion or whatever? That's a huge paradox.
right.
Maybe let's get to that a little later. First, I really like what you brought up there. It's a productivity problem, I would say, and it's a paradox of productivity, right? Where we kind of have these long-term goals that we want to achieve in order to be able to live the life that we want.
Right.
Yet, life is happening right here, right now, at the present moment. And so if we constantly sacrifice the present moment for a better future, well, we kind of sacrifice our life the entire time, right? And
Exactly.
that's when you're an entrepreneur and you're trying to work towards certain goals, or even if you're just ambitious and you have, any type of goal, it can be frustrating if you're always in that, oh, I have to work harder to get it,
Right.
if you're constantly in that mood. And at the
Yep.
same time, though, you have to kind of stop to smell the flowers, or how they say it, and
Yep.
remind yourself that this is life happening. So you ought to pick something that you're passionate about while you're doing it, so that you can lose yourself in the moment doing the thing you like to do, and at the same time progress toward a better future. And that pulling that together, I think, is pretty challenging and difficult.
It is. Yeah, that's an interesting point you said there, because I did live a period of my life where it was like, I gotta be doing something. I gotta be doing something. I gotta be doing something. And I did essentially waste a period of my life away thinking that there was something I absolutely should be doing, or there's something in the world that I could be changing right now all the time. And during that period of time, I let go of my family. I've missed out on a lot of experiences, and and it just was unhealthy to live that way, unhealthy to not actually stop and smell the flowers or take joy in some of the smaller, more intricate things in life rather than I know you've seen a lot of the stuff I've put out before, but it was always like, oh, there's a lot of things wrong with the world. There's a lot of problems with the world. We should change them like this. If you are doing all of these things, if you're drinking alcohol, you're hurting yourself, and you're not working towards, changing yourself and being better. And I was just stuck in that type of mentality. So it's interesting that you bring that up, and it's a good point because, yeah, it's a good point. It's healthy. It's healthy to have those types of things. And I do. Oh, sorry.
I think what this has to do with paradoxes and if they're real or not is that there's often more than one, I don't know if I want to say reality or more than one option. Often there's just two things, right? Which is that symbolism of the yin yang, which
right.
is both
it's
halves.
Like a polarity.
Exactly.
Yes.
And each half contains the opposing side as well, contains a little bit of that one as well. And that in many times that's just a fitting symbol of what makes life what it is.
Right.
And so, then we can end up in this black and white thinking, but often that's not necessarily the most helpful way to think. And it does bring up a lot of paradoxes.
Right. So
but
yeah,
then,
it's not a good thing to get stuck in one or the other, but to be aware that both of them exist at the same time, all the time, and to try and remain balanced at all times. So I think the key here is balance, and finding balance in this huge paradox of life is the humbling thing that will help you succeed and grow. It keeps you from getting too hot-headed while also keeping you from not getting into a slump of depression type of thing. So yes, that's good. Yes.
Exactly that. Well said. And as true as that is, I think it can be really challenging sometimes too to remind yourself
it's a journey.
of that and stay grounded in both. Exactly. So what's that have to do with are paradoxes real though? I mean, what is real? How do you define real? Is a paradox real? I mean, that's a deep one. That's a big one.
It's a hard one to answer. Yeah. So I guess it would just go off of what is a paradox, and how would you define a paradox as deeply as we can define one? And to me, it's simply as two things that contradict each other. And that's where like the yin and the yang come together right in the center. And it's almost like a fire right there, like clashing of those two things, which make up this right now physical moment of things that we're able to experience. All these things happening at the same time. And I know that real life is really real. So if we call real life a paradox or something that contradicts itself all the time but continuously going, I don't know. Is real life real at this point? How do we define life? Right. So it's
well, yeah. So I think at least what I've began to understand better, and sometimes when I express that, it sounds kind of like, well, yeah, of course it's like that, but to really think about all the possibilities and then arrive back at that conclusion, right? For me, that kind of was profound, but to realize that the reality that exists in our mind, including all the possibilities, I kind of imagine it like a funnel going this way, right? The entire multiverse, everything that you could know, possibly know, all the future possibilities that you think about, they exist in your brain. That's where you come up with them, right? Your plans for the future, your theories and models about how the world works, and all the paradoxes that you have concluded, including the yin-yang symbol, right? The yin-yang symbol is just a human drawing. We can't go out in the universe or in nature and find an actual yin-yang there. We can just kind of have that mental model. So it exists in our minds. And things that exist in our mind that are imaginary like that or virtual, they are, per the common definition, not part of reality. Reality is that which is objectively real and existing in the universe, and then that which is imaginary is just in our minds. Now, the interesting thing is, even as you and I talk right here, we're using imaginary stuff to convey information between our brains, right? So we're somehow communicating between this metaverse that only exists in our brains. And if some,
Right.
I don't know, if some dolphin, let's say a dolphin, right, they're intelligent. If a dolphin was right here and would listen to us, I don't know, it probably wouldn't
Right.
be too real for that
Right.
dolphin, so that,
Right.
that,
Right.
so in that case, paradoxes exist. They exist in our mental, metaphysical multiverse that we make up with our minds, but they're not part of reality.
Right. Right. Yeah. The physical construct. Exactly.
But that's, of course, a kind of materialist or physicalist, I forget the word, view of the world, right? I assume here that matter came first, and then our brains were created from matter, and then our brains created consciousness on top of that. Some people assume the opposite position. They assume
Right.
consciousness came first, and consciousness manifested the real world.
Right. Right. And that's a paradox right there, wouldn't it be?
That is the
Yes.
mind matter paradox, right? The mind matter problem. And that same problem wraps us also back around to the free will versus determinism problem. Which is it? Is the
Right.
universe just unfolding according to whatever the original conditions were? Or
Uh,
do we have some type of control and choice in the unfolding of the universe?
I think that's the biggest paradox for me, and that's the most humbling one for me, because it's like there are things that you can objectively change about the world. For example, I can move my notebook from over here, from side to side, move the placement of it, and I cannot change the color or hue of my skin. And then there's other things that you can't necessarily change about the world, but you can influence. So like I could not necessarily change what is going to happen to me or play out to me, because I could not stop another individual from walking up to me and saying certain words to me. Like that's all within their free will, and why that's playing out for what reasons they have in them and what's going on in their life. It's manifesting that way. Yeah, it's just all real interesting how the universe ticks for real. And this it is.
So those are honestly the things that I hope we can. I look at that. I'm gonna make it about enolve now for a second. I don't want to talk
Oh,
about
please
it too
do.
much, but thank you. I look at those things, those paradoxes, right, and I see them as problems. And if I see a problem, I think, well, let's try to solve it, see where we get. And as we put in these different problems, solutions, and connect them and just keep them as individual statements that can be evaluated one at a time. And as we do that collectively, right, as more people join together and add their contributions, their unique perspectives, exactly what I was describing earlier about the multiverse. It
The
exists in
funnel.
everybody's mind, right, that funnel, but now we kind of create an overlap of all the funnels of everybody who decides to participate, and we actually make that real in a sense that we created on like the servers and the computer infrastructure that we have. And so we put it all together there for everyone to access, see, and influence. Sorry about the siren, kind of loud, I imagine.
Oh, right.
Yeah,
It's
so
coming through.
where I'm excited about to see what we're going to find out. And that, to me, that is the frontier that perhaps enolve can push forward.
Right, right. I really love what you got going with the knob. I honestly have never seen anything like it, and I think the what you have going on, and then the purpose and reason behind it to solve like major problems in the world is just, I think it's going to go a long way. And I've seen a lot of folks, and I've heard, I like just reading comments and stuff. A lot of folks want to compare it to things like Stack Overflow and other similar type of softwares. And to me, I just see it going way farther than that, because it is literally centered around solving the problem and the stigma of problem solving. And that's where I feel like a lot of us in the world are stuck at, because so many people have so many problems and they can't even recognize, like I did for a period of my life, that there are even problems there. And some of the problems exist on such a large scale too, that it's like how do we narrow down so many of these things and break them down, like without like writing them down on paper and getting everyone to contribute somehow. Like I think this is one of the greatest steps, like in technology towards like making the world a better place. I really do. And this is why I was supporting enolve from the beginning, because I've not seen anything like this yet.
Amazing. Thank you for your words. It really
Yes.
means a lot that you can see it and reflect it like that. And yeah, that's what I see as well. And I mean, I hear that what people say about it's kind of like Quora or Stack Overflow in that sense. And I'm not going to lie, part of the inspiration came from that, right? I see a website where people ask a question, and it's pretty powerful how we can just find an answer now because somebody 5 years ago asked that exact same question, right? Especially Stack Overflow, where it's like programming questions. I still get notifications about an answer I posted 5 years back, and people still find it useful.
Right.
Exactly
Me too.
that.
Yeah.
Now, what this just lacks, it's very linear, right? And there's a lack of definition of what makes a question, and so it becomes community moderated. And that's where one of the pain points I have with these is I ask a question, I think it's a perfectly legit question, and they berate me. That's not a good question. That's out of the scope for the site. Close it down. And I legit had a question. I wanted the answer. I asked the internet for help, and they just yell at me for asking a bad question. Right? And so with enolve, the key difference there is that when you do make a statement that you want to be a problem or a solution, the only thing you have to do is connect it to a goal that's either fulfilled or violated, right? And so I think that subtle difference, plus the entire kind of networking effect that it gives, where each problem and solution is a unique individual entity that can be connected to other entities, just like those goals, that gives the entire structure that's being created from that a whole different, dynamic than the Q&A sites, including on Facebook, right? On Facebook, you can also post a question, and then it's formatted to a question, and the answers are, well, comments, but they're just linear. There's no way to cross-link and reference previous answers.
Right. Okay. All right. Yep. Yep. I had a question about enolve, and I'll go ahead and ask it here. And we had discussed it before previously, but did you ever go and define what enolve's core values were going to be? So like, you did go ahead and do that. I don't know if it's been somewhere. So like, I've heard before it was like freedom, peace, and prosperity were to be like top goals that like we identified, or enolve has identified as something that everybody wants, and that's what we all are hopefully trying to work towards collectively. I was just wondering if you had if enolved on that a little further.
Yeah, I have actually enolved further on it, and through my conversation with people, I have realized a deeper meaning, a deeper level of how you can interpret enolve. And I did that in the video about perspectives. So they're pretty much these goals that I described earlier, and you just described them, like, right? For example, peace and freedom and prosperity, let's say those three right now. Those are my personal goals, and you might identify with them as well, right? And so you and I together, we would strive for those. And if you and I, if we look at enolve as a solution, we look at the solution enolve and we're saying, yeah, it perfectly fulfills those goals, right? Fulfills our need for freedom and peace and prosperity. But somebody else might have different goals. I don't know. They might have, for example, adventure and exploration and creating knowledge as their goals. And they can also see enolve as that solution. So now it's the same solution
to scope it down.
Right. Well, I mean, scope it down. It scopes it out. I think it just makes it more broad. But so it's the same solution that fulfills two different goals.
Right.
And I think that's entirely possible. And yeah, so and that's what actually creates diversity, right? Which is a big point as I'm creating this fairly centralized and monopolistic, almost authoritarian system. Is like, well, I don't want to be no dictator here, right? I want to make sure that people continue to have choice and that there is individuality and all of that. And so I think it's built into the system. Of course, that's kind of a bold claim, and maybe there's something I'm missing still about it that it doesn't. But as far as I can tell, it seems to be pretty it seems to be pretty stable in that respect. Kind of like we discovered that democracy and the checks and balances, at least in theory, they kind of balance out the system, and they shouldn't lead to anything that's too terrible. So I think that as an additional layer on top of that can help with all that.
Right. That's good.
Now we drifted quite far away from paradoxes though, but
Right.
do you have any final comments regarding paradoxes or something like that?
No,
No?
no.
It was good talking, Ron. Good talking.
Good, yeah.
Interesting stuff. Definitely
Right.
got my gears going here.
Yeah. Yeah, well, I know you said you wanted to keep this short. You didn't want to do it for too long. So yeah, whenever
Yeah.
you want to
When
cut
I
it off, I could sit and talk about so many things. So
yeah,
I
just
don't want to stare it off course or
when I personally go on Facebook and then there's like a live that's like an hour and a half long, it's like, oh, this could be interesting, but I'm only here for like a half hour or something like
right,
that,
right,
right?
yeah.
So
Well,
I'd
that works
rather
out
keep
too.
it
So
short. Yeah.
yeah, right,
Awesome, man.
awesome.
Well, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for the valuable input and contributions here. And
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
let's
not
do
a
it again
problem.
soon sometime.
Yeah, for sure. Thanks for doing what you're doing. Keep evolving.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. Have a good one,
All right,
Ron.
later, brother.